nature has enough to meet everyone's need, but not enough for everyone's greed. Therefore, there is a need for better and better utilization of resources as well as of conservation of resources for the future need, and thus better management of all the resources because their stocks are limited. We will discuss various aspects related to these concepts of man resource relationship. Human resource is the most precious of all resources. Man plays the dual role of a producer or creator and a consumer or destroyer of resources. Man offers his labor, primary mental and secondary physical, when creates a resource. He interacts with nature and built up a cultural way of life. Cultural lessens his physical labor. He has a definite aim and purpose, and thus he enjoys the benefits of advancing civilization. But the dual role played by man in the overall scheme of resource development is not necessarily separated by time and space. He gets joy out of creation, becomes dejected when he fails. In every stage of advancement in civilization, man's role as a producer has been glorified. Man is essentially an element of nature, but he is different from other elements of nature because he has the capacity to think and act accordingly. Thus, he is not only the producer, but also director, planner and aspirer. More liberates himself from the strangle of physical labor. More he reaps the fruit of real wealth for the future. This seems to be predicted by his unique aptitude. So, the role of man in the scheme of resource development should be evaluated from the viewpoint of mental faculty than physical labor, wherein he is lagged behind. Maximization in production has primarily been achieved by man either by division of labor or through specialization. Apart from his role user or creator, man's role as a consumer is equally important in the scheme of resource development. It is indeed the human wants that boost the process of production. Resources are developed only to satisfy certain degrees of human wants. Human wants can be broadly classified into two, that is the basic wants and cultural wants. So, when we talk about the basic wants, it includes primarily the needs for food, clothing, shelter, and thus are related with the material aspect of our life. But human wants are never ending in nature. They do not cease to exist with the satisfaction of basic wants. Rather, it leads to greater magnitude of wants. We may thus conclude satisfaction of primary or basic needs simply results in the creation of greater human needs. So, not only want alone, but also satisfaction that motivates man to act in the role of producer. Man's role as a consumer or destroyer of resource is no less important than that of the producer because satisfaction rests on himself. Actually, production and consumption of resources are integrated in an endless chain. We must also consider the means of satisfying the wants. Means or ways must be in accordance with the ends which they usually serve. As the wants change, there must be change in the means of satisfying them. They must reflect the changes in social objectives which are also liable to change in accordance with the change in the political ideology. For example, the entire process of resource creation in India underwent a radical change with the departure of the British colonial lords and with the establishment of a new welfare government in independent India. So, the satisfaction of individual desire and national desire constituted the end values to be achieved in the process. In emphasizing the dual role of man, in the scheme of resource development, E.M. Hoover remarked, the study of human resources is vital from the point of view of economic welfare. It is particularly important because human beings are not only instruments of production, but also ends in themselves. Man is the producer of resources on one hand and simultaneously consumer of resources. In this context, Professor Zimmermann has remarked, as an agent of production, man contributes his labor, mental and physical. With the aid, advice and consent of nature, he builds culture to render more effect his production efforts and to lessen the impact of resistances. He discovers new ways and invents new arts. His aspirations furnish aim and purpose. As beneficiary, he enjoys the advantages of advancing civilization. Considering the vastness of nature, any individual is physically insignificant, but man has been empowered with intelligence. So, as a producer and consumer, role of man is ever increasing. Again, in the words of Professor Zimmermann, man is predestined to be the director, planner and aspirer. Over the ages, his role increased from a mere manual laborer to that of a master of robots and director of inanimate forces. In this way, a productivity of man has increased manifold and man reap a richer harvest of material goods and great leisure. To play much higher role in the overall productivity system, the prime requisites are good health, physical fitness, proper training, education, etc. So, human being is the most converted among all resources because they are the end values to be achieved in the process. Man plays a unique role in resource development, and as we have discussed that he is both the producer as well as the consumer of resources. As a resource producer, man contributes his labor, mental and physical. He creates culture to make his labor more productive and to lessen the impact of resistances. He discovers new ways and invents new arts. Aided by nature on the one hand and the culture on the other hand, he builds up resources. It is man who changes neutral stuff into resources. Advancement in human civilization are marked through improvements of man's role as producer of resources. Though man is physically weak, but he is endowed with excellent mental qualities. Progress of civilization marks a gradual shift of his role from the physical toil to that of measuring machines and energy. As he is relieved of physical labor, he specializes in mental work and thus he creates culture and invents more effective ways and means. For higher forms of mental work, man not only be physically fit and healthy, but also properly educated and trained. Promotion of public health and education therefore assumes great importance in any program of resource development. There is no end to cultural wants. They go on increasing as man advances in technology of things and matter. Man consumes resources for satisfying these unending wants. Thus, resources are dynamic and never expanding, not only in response to increased knowledge and improved art, but also in response to the ever changing and expanding social wants or objectives. Means must be according to ends, that is wants, which they serve. If wants change, means also must change. Resources reflects wants. Individual or social resources of independent India are different from those of British India. They reflect the changes in social objectives. Satisfaction of human wants and social objectives constitutes the end values to be achieved in the process. Thus, man in his dual role of producer and consumer is the guiding factor in resource development. Culture has unique dichotomy. It enlarges the existing base of resources. It also removes the resistances. Culture reduces the natural resistance like natural calamities, disasters, while human resistance like health, literacy, superstition can be removed with the help of cultural development. Like nature, culture also has got both resources and resistances. Culture acts as an agent to remove the natural hindrances. Efficient transportation network helps trade and commerce and is considered as an economic or cultural resource. But transportation bottlenecks hinder such development and thereby may be considered as an example of cultural resistance. The problem can simply be solved by making provision of good transportation network. Culture not only reduces the influence of natural resistance, but also removes the human constraints like literacy, health, conservative attitudes, etc. through the extension of education, sanitation, public health services and proper government. Culture helps to remove all sorts of resistances, be it natural or human. Culture is an aid to both nature and man. Man, in his journey towards progress, has devised culture which in turn has greatly affected the material way of life of man. Cultural devices like machines and other scientific as well as technological innovations helped man in increasing productivity. The art of terrace cultivation application of chemical fertilizers, pesticides and insecticides, grafting and hybridizing help nature in multiplying its productivity. Apart from the different ways to reduce the volume of labor intangible such as modern and efficient management, group cooperation, recreation, education, extensive training, improved condition for health and better sanitation are equally important cultural devices which help men in increasing productivity. Thus, the economically and technically advanced countries of the West have greatly reduced the effects of scarce supply of labor by more materially advanced culture. Man and nature are original resource creating factors. Culture is a derived factor. Culture includes magic material things like machine tools, means of transportation, warehouses, etc. and non-material things like education, social institution, habits and customs, management, etc. For material things, obviously nature aids man. Man creates culture with natural substances. Nature as a resource creating factor has many defects. Man corrects these defects by cultural improvements. For example, man raises soil fertility and provides water to get higher yields. He also uses machines and tools to produce more. He develops transport system to carry things to the needed place. He erects warehouses to store surplus production. He develops the art of refrigeration to preserve things. All these aspects are cultures created by men and they are related to nature. Man's non-material culture also develops with aid and advice of nature. Man does not always go ahead on against the resistances of nature. Rather, he tries to adjust himself with nature. For example, the Bengalis eat rice while the Punjabis eat wheat, not as a matter of habit, but because of the dictates of nature. Neutral condition favor rice cultivation in Bengal and wheat cultivation in Punjab. Thus, man develops habits as nature permits him to do so. Similarly, divergent social habits, customs and institutions have developed in various parts of the world with the aid and suggestions of nature. Man adapts himself to nature consciously and willingly. All these adaptations and means of adjustments are cultures. It is evident that man is the creator of culture, but nature also plays a decisive role in shaping it. In short, culture is the joint product of man and nature. Culture existed even before the coming of machine, but its impact on nature was only superficial. The cultural landscape of the pre-industrial era was only a modification of the natural landscape. But the power machine has brought in a violent and sudden change to the natural landscape. The industrial landscape with modern skyscrapers, factories, railroads and highways, airfields, dockyards, warehouses, etc. has totally changed the original natural landscape. Today man lives amidst nature surrounding him and amidst culture created by him. Culture, like nature, includes both resources and resistances. Man makes many direct and indirect adaptation and adjustment to his natural environment. He superimposes culture on nature. Cultural environment is simple and more directly related with nature in the early stages of social evolution. It becomes increasingly complex and indirect as society grows up in size and knowledge. The important elements of cultural environment include language, literature, education, politics, government and social institutions, religion, philosophy, etc., all of which are abstract elements. One of the major facilities surrounding the resources concept is that resources are static or fixed in amount. Agricultural revolution and the industrial revolution are excellent examples of multiple resource innovation. A simple stick becomes a resource when used to poke, pry and shake trees and bushes for food. In fact, non-material resources can be constantly created. New ideas and better organization have no limit. We also see that material resources that can be replenished, such as trees, crops, animals, soils, rivers, etc., which are known as flow resources, are used repeatedly and improved upon. What may be more difficult to see is that fund resources, often called non-renewable resources, are also created. For example, the fund resources are non-reusable minerals such as coal and petroleum. Technological improvement can result in the creation of fund resources into two major ways. Number one, a need may be found for a formerly unused mineral or element. Uranium had no use until the development of atomic power. Many rare earths were inert until high temperature technology created a need for them. It was only in the early century that techniques for extracting nitrogen from atmosphere were perfected, giving rise to an important segment of the fertilizer industry. We also find that the early phases of the industrial revolution led to the use of aluminum, numerous ferroalloys and natural gas. Coming to the second one, perhaps more important in the last 100 years has been the addition to the fund resource base of low quality mineral deposits. Prior to the advent of mass transportation and suitable processing equipment, only the richest mineral deposits could be mined economically. Once technology became available to mine low quality deposits, they became resources. For example, most of the world's copper is produced from ores containing less than 3% copper. The rich iron ores of the famous Mesabi range in northeastern Minnesota have been largely worked out, but taconite, a low quality or previously thought worthless, has become the basis of continued exploitation. Another example of expand mineral land resource is petroleum, much of which not to be obtained without numerous advances in drilling technology. Technology has also expanded the agriculture resource base in several ways. The amount of arable land has been increased through improvement of seeds and mechanization of cropping. By seed selection and hybridization, new varieties of crops have been developed that are both drought resistant or can mature in a shorter time than formerly. Man needs natural resources to satisfy his wants. Expanding human population during the last century in particular resulted into expanding needs of man. With scientific progress and technological development, man started utilizing natural resources at a much larger scale. Continuous increase in population caused an increasing demand for resources. Today, the greatest problem is one of constant struggle between overgrowing human needs and limited natural resources. Malthus, the famous economist, believed that manpower is much greater than the capacity of the land to sustain such population. When unchecked population grows geometrically while the means of sustenance increase in an arithmetical ratio only, it is obvious then that the increasing population will give rise to human needs while the stock of resources to satisfy those needs is limited. This will create a situation when non-renewable resource may come to an end after some time. In order to maximize production, we have started even taking loans from the resources meant for the future that cannot be paid back. As a result, we would be using all those resources which are in fact the property of future generation. It is a matter of grave concern. There must be some sort of balance between the population growth and the utilization of natural resources. The non-availability of resources and their price rise have created an adverse effect on the economies of countries world over. The prices of petroleum after 1973 showed abrupt hike. The growth rates of food production and economic development suffered setbacks. There are a number of other examples of the problems created by overutilization of resources. In many countries, much of underground water is being utilized for irrigation purposes. This has resulted in lowering the water table, especially in northern China, India and elsewhere. There is thus need for water conservation. Conservation is also concerned with complete elimination of some unique species for which there may be no alternative at all. One cannot imagine a situation if penicillium has been eliminated from nature before mankind made use of it as an antibiotic, or cinchona became extinct before quinine was discovered as a cure for malaria. It is therefore in our own interest to conserve our plant, animal and microbial diversity. The word conservation is derived from two Latin words, that is con meaning together and servare meaning to keep or guard. Literally, therefore, conservation means to keep together. The word was coined by 𝗂𝗽𝗺 shortly after the White House Conference in 1908. The conservation of natural resources is thus a concept that deals with the rational use of resources so that a harmony between man's resource requirements and its availability can be established. While renewable resources need a proper resource management system, the non-renewable resource required a long-term strategy for their proper use. This is not only necessary to assume long-term resource use, but also to protect the ecosystem. The focal point of discussion was the global pollution of the biosphere due to increased development activities. It was observed that the amount of waste materials, that is solid, liquid and gaseous, was increasing at a faster rate. These waste materials are still being accumulated and polluting the global environment. It is high time that water and air pollution should be controlled from the viewpoint of health world over. Scientists have already started shaping the environment so as to improve the conditions of living of the people. Today, man lives amidst nature surrounding him and amidst culture created by him. Culture, like nature, includes both resources and resistances. Man and nature are original resource creating factor. Culture is a derived factor. Like nature, culture has also got both resources and resistance. Culture acts as agent to remove the natural hindrances. Advancements in human civilization are marked through improvements of man's role as producer of resources.